You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron, and a happy Friday to you all. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, as we continue to show love to some of the lesser teams in the NFL who finished at the bottom of the barrel at the end of the 2024 season, and as we roll our way into the 2025 season, we're going to be talking the New England Patriots, giving them a bit of a season preview, going over some of the things that I'm really looking forward to seeing play out over the duration of the season for a team that has gone through quite a bit of a regime change this past offseason. So plenty to discuss, plenty to get into. I invite you all, of course, to comment down below. Let me hear from you all. We're obviously coming hot off the news of some wild trading going on in the NFL, as Micah Parsons is obviously a Green Bay Packer, a guy that, honestly, the Patriots, depending on who you talk to, may or may not have been able to use themselves if they were willing to give up the capital for it. But we're going to take a look at these Pats here. So, like I said, comment down below. Let me hear from you all. Thoughts, opinions on the Patriots' upcoming season here and what they could be in store for. I got three different things here I want to talk about. And the first thing I'm really, honestly, like one of the most intriguing, I would say, positional groups around the NFL right now, because it feels like it's so just like up in the air, I guess you could say. It's got to be this wide receiver room in New England here, because there's high hopes, there's expectations, but there's also a lot of uncertainty around what this group could actually be. And it honestly was a bit of a bumpy road getting to where the Patriots currently are with their wide receiver room. Obviously, their initial 53-man roster started off with 8 wide receivers, 9 if you want to include the injured Jalen Polk, who is on season-ending IR. He will not be seeing the field this season. But of course, as the days moved on, we saw Javon Baker let go. He's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. Kendrick Bourne is currently fielding some visits himself, I believe, with the 49ers and some other suitors as well. So those two guys, after making the cut, are no longer on the football team just a couple of days later. And then, of course, the rest of the wide receiver room, you're looking at guys like Stefon Diggs, Demario Douglas, of course, Kayshon Boutte, who seems to be having himself a very strong camp and a very strong summer, and it seems like expectations could be pretty high for him. You have the undrafted rookie free agent in Efton Chisholm, who made himself onto the roster here. There's a lot to be excited about with what this unit could potentially be if all goes well, but there's a lot of intrigue and uncertainty to me, a lot of unproven talent and a lot of question marks. Of course, Stefon Diggs, and is like with his ability to come back from the ACL injury that he's recovering from, and there's already been enough drama to make the Patriots fan head spin just a little bit through this offseason with what Stefon Diggs has been up to off the field, and then even just some of the questioning on just how ready he actually is and the amount of time he was seeing on the practice field in certain stages of this past summer leading in through the preseason. But when you look at some of the numbers, you look at just where Drake Maye has been throwing that football during camp. I want to shout out Mass Live for this here, because they did a great job of tracking every single pass of Drake Maye here. When you look at just number of passes to specific wide receivers, this isn't completions or anything like that. This is targets, just straight up who he was getting the football to. The big three, I guess you could say, is looking like Demario Douglas, Stefon Diggs, and Kayshon Boutte. And quite frankly, that just doesn't really feel like much of a surprise to me. I feel like those are the three most rock-solid guys based off of everything that I have personally seen and everything that I have heard about, read about over the last month or so as we've worked our way through the preseason here. Diggs and Douglas are always guys that I anticipated seeing a ton of snaps here, but Kayshon Boutte is one of those guys that I'm honestly, if there's anyone like I'm most excited to see play out this year from this group altogether, it might be him, because those three guys, like I said, they're the ones seeing the bulk majority of the targets. Behind them, you have Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson. Mac Hollins, the next closest in total number of targets, with just 8 for the wide receiver group. But I mean, you look at what all of these guys could potentially be at their finest. A lot of people look at Demario Douglas as a very strong candidate as a slot wide receiver. And of course, that leaves you with Stefon Diggs and Kayshon Boutte working the outside as needed. A lot of this will come down to obviously how Drake Maye fares in year number 2. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of question marks surrounding the pass protection, but I do think a lot of this is riding on Stefon Diggs as a whole. I think if he can't get back to even some semblance of what we were seeing from him prior to him going down in Houston last season with that ACL tear. I do think this wide receiver room could be in a bit of trouble. Kayshon Boutte, like I said, is also someone that I really have my eyes on because his blend of size and speed, a lot of people seem to be really high on him, and it's easy to forget that prior to him ultimately getting hurt while he was still in college and his draft stock taking a bit of a tumble, this was somebody that was projecting out to end up potentially being a first-round talent with how good he looked at LSU, and we all know what LSU seems to be these days. They are just an absolute unit of a wide receiver factory, churning out guys each and every single season, and with just how much he has seemed to impress everyone, whether it's beat writers, whether it's the people playing with him on the football field, or even just the fact of Drake Maye himself. When you see Kayshon Boutte, the third highest targets he has sent the football to through the duration of this summer camp, the intrigue, the big mystery of what this wide receiver room could potentially be is one of those things that even just league wide I'm fascinated by. And like you talk like the addition of just like Efton Chisholm and what he's shown for this team, and if he could do anything, you have so much intrigue and just so much questions about who's going to do what, who's going to look how. And we're not even talking about third-round draft pick Kyle Williams. There's another guy right there, an absolute burner who could see plenty of time on this football field as well this upcoming season. There's a lot to like, a lot to question, a lot to wonder about, a lot of uncertainty, and it makes it one of the most interesting groups in the NFL as a whole, never mind just on the New England Patriots in my eyes. And I think that actually is a perfect segue right into the guy that's dishing out the football. That's the next big thing for me as far as the Patriots are concerned. Can Drake Maye avoid a sophomore slump, or in his case, I guess you could say, bit of a meh season overall? 2024 was nothing super impressive by any stretch of the imagination. I think if you're being objective with what you got out of Drake Maye, I don't think you walked away from his very first season blown away by any means. You probably feel hopeful about some of the good things you saw, but there are also things that probably scared you a little bit about his game as well. 15 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. You had some concussion scares. You only played in 13 games, and we obviously have to got to mention this before we even get into it, but obviously last season as a whole, without question, everything going on around him was a bit of an organizational disaster, and I think that's putting it very simply here. You look at just the way ownership handled everything from last year with the Crafts to the front office and their drafting or inability to do so, and then of course the coaching staff, or the just lack thereof, if you really want to even call it much of a coaching staff. The fact that Drake Maye beat out Jacoby Brissett in training camp throughout the preseason, and it was said as much by Gerard Mayo himself, and then wasn't ultimately named the starter, has got to be one of the crazier, like, malpractice type of things you have seen from the NFL. Bit asinine, if you ask me. But Drake Maye himself, though, all of that craziness aside, he wasn't perfect, and he wasn't bad either. So there's somewhere in between. Like, you look at his interceptions, and if you go back and you watch the tape, obviously there is missing context. Like, you don't necessarily know where a receiver is supposed to be or anything like that. The only people that know that are the receiver, Drake Maye, and the play caller who was calling the plays for him last season. But if you go through the tape and you look at the 10 interceptions that he had last season, there is an argument to be made that like 6 to 8 of those interceptions within that ballpark are on him, and they're either just complete misfires, bad decisions, overthrows, underthrows. There's a wide array of just different mistakes, and he's a rookie. It's gonna happen. I'm not gonna sit here and say that Drake Maye can't improve in year number 2, but there are things that leave you wondering, can he overcome some of that decision making, some of those errant throws? And we even saw some of them pop up during the preseason as well. And, you know, what you make of the preseason is totally up to you. I completely understand whether you feel one way or the other about it, how much you actually take away from it. But for me right now, with what we've seen from Drake Maye, and just knowing that Josh McDaniels' offense is not typically known for being one of the easier offenses in the NFL, especially when you look at like the heyday of the Patriots with Josh McDaniels in that system, things got crazily complicated. Wide receivers known to struggle in that system, and it's certainly something you have to just keep in mind as we go into this season. I would like to say that I'm cautiously optimistic about Drake Maye and about this Patriots offense as a whole. There is good that's there when you look back at Drake Maye's tape. Do not get me wrong, but there is some glaring bad here and there sprinkled in that keeps me from really feeling like, yeah, that year 2 jump, like I'm all in, I'm here for it, I'm buying it. It's great to hear that everyone internally seems to feel like he's going to make that big leap. But unfortunately, that is what basically all 32 teams in the NFL are currently saying internally about just about everybody on their football team right now. This is the season of positivity. Everyone feels good about the year going into it. And it's just one of those remains to be seen. And and again, going back to the preseason and how much does it really mean, I wasn't overly impressed by some of what we saw from the Patriots in the preseason. And it's one of those things where I would have liked to see a little bit more, I guess, offense specifically. I should say first team offense specifically. Let me say that. And again, I get it's preseason. I would have liked to see a little bit more juice. There were some good drives from Drake Maye. Don't get me wrong. There were some ugly drives from Drake Maye as well. And I think that all needs to be taken into account. But I'm again, very, very interested in what both that wide receiver room and Drake Maye can do on this offense this season. It's one of the most fascinating teams considering everything that has changed this year and just how much positivity surrounds this organization internally, but also externally. The amount of people that are showing the Patriots love and just how much everyone seems to expect to have this offense as a whole improved, let alone what the defense could look like as well. It's one of the most fascinating things I've seen. And then going for my final point that I want to hit on here, another guy that I really need to be cautiously optimistic about, it's going to be Milton Williams. And obviously, big ticket signing. 4 years, $104 million deal. You're looking at $63 million guaranteed. He is the big ticket signing for this team and is hopefully going to be a big impact playmaker on the interior of that defensive line. I want to start off by saying this, that I do like the signing. First and foremost, do not get me wrong, it was the right move for the Patriots. It was an expensive move, and I think there is a fair conversation of, is this worth the money? But unfortunately, that's the market. That's how it shook out. They literally had to rip Milton Williams out of the hands of the Carolina Panthers. There was reports already coming out that he was agreeing with the Panthers before all of a sudden it was just a few minutes later. But wait, there's more. Just kidding. Milton Williams is going to New England. So that's the market. It is what it is. It's not like they could get around paying those numbers. And even Milton Williams himself said in interviews, it was all about who wanted me most. The New England Patriots showed it. And obviously, how do you show that? It's not by the love. It's by the dollars on the paycheck. So I get the reason for having to pay them all. My gripes with Milton Williams, though, are not his play, not his ability, not what he's shown in the limited opportunity that he's had during his 4 years in Philadelphia, but it is that limited opportunity that he's had in Philadelphia. With never starting more than 10 games in a season for his career, his regular season-long snap counts, this is not including playoff numbers, just on a typical season-long, around 500 or so snaps. You could add in an extra 20 to 40 or so once you start accounting in for the playoffs that he may have seen during his 4 seasons there in Philadelphia as well. He wasn't a starter, at least consistently. And on top of that, he's coming in, and the expectations are you're coming in to produce as a starter at a high level. I think when you compare him to that of a Jeffrey Simmons, who was the star interior defensive lineman of Mike Vrabel's past in Tennessee, a guy who would roughly on a healthy season rip through anywhere from 800 to 850 to 900 plus snaps in a season. That is the expectation for Milton Williams, and I don't think that there's any real question about that. There's a reason the Patriots went after Milton and paid him the way they did. He is going to be expected to be that Jeffrey Simmons of their defense. I know they have Christian Barmore, and maybe he alleviates some of that, but you don't pay him that type of money, Jeffrey Simmons type of money, and not expect those type of results and just the absolute dominance you get from a guy like a Jeffrey Simmons there. So hence kind of a little bit of, again, cautious optimism. I think it's the right move. It's the right thing. There's a lot of money, though, being invested in with a contract that's essentially projections and expectations over results already proven. Couple that with the fact that Milton Williams is coming from Philadelphia, who just has been surrounded by talent literally his entire career. From when he first started out having guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Javon Hargrave surrounding him on the interior of that defensive line, to ultimately, as the unit started to change over, you started getting Jordan Davis and then Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat, you had Hassan Reddick, those two guys coming off the edges. Like, there was always so much talent surrounding Milton Williams on that defensive front. You have to wonder what you have gotten from Milton Williams. How much of that is a byproduct of his surroundings? Now, if you want to look at that from the other side of things, you could say the argument for him, well, he comes from a team that is known for having an extremely strong, well-respected pedigree of players that expectations are typically through the roof for, especially along that defensive front in Philadelphia. And it's not like Philly let him walk because they didn't want him there. They let him walk because look at what the market paid him. They weren't going to be able to pay him that much money with just how much talent they have on that football team and what they need to account for over the next few seasons. And then there's also, of course, the conversation of, yeah, there's a lot of talent there, a lot of really good, strong talent, a lot of good leaders on that football team, and that's where he's coming from. That is the cloth that he is being cut from and now bringing into New England. So there are those positive spins on that narrative as well. It's not just, oh, you can't buy his numbers because of the talent around him. You could also sit there and say, well, the argument to that is, well, he comes from a place where elite talent is expected of you, elite work ethic is expected of you. He grew up around that in the NFL. You're hoping he brings that here, and maybe he does do just that. So it's one of those things where, again, I like it. I understand the amount of money that went to him. My concern is more so just the limited opportunities more than anything else that he has seen to this point, and the amount of money you're paying him for projections and expectations over what you've actually gotten out of a Milton Williams to this point in his very young career. As for just the Patriots as a whole in this season, kind of my projected win total for this team, this was probably one of the harder teams to do this for because depending on where you look and how much of a Patriots diehard you're talking to, or on the other end of that spectrum, you could hear 10 wins in a playoff appearance. You could hear 5 or 6 wins and things aren't that much better. I'm sitting in the camp, and this is probably the widest gap I've done so far, of about 6 to 8 wins with this team. I think 6 wins is like, clearly the roster is not where it needs to be yet. They won a few extra games that they maybe lost the season prior that with better coaching they ultimately came away with wins with. 8 wins is where I'm starting to really think is like, this is like everything's really going well, and you make that first really good jump in year number 1 as a team. You double your win total. You're eyeing the correct path to be going down, and you're probably thinking 2026 season, that's where you're thinking, okay, playoffs and maybe more on top of that. But this season, 6 to 8 wins is kind of where I'm settling on. I could be wrong on that one, but I think with better coaching, with a better offensive system, with better weaponry around Drake Maye on the offense, with the defense, at least on paper, looking better, it should be a better unit. There are things worth keeping an eye on right now that are kind of shaking up literally in real time. The Patriots just released Jabril Peppers, like a couple hours ago from me recording this. And then there's also some concern around Christian Gonzalez, who has yet to have practiced in the last month, maybe even a little bit more than that since July 28th. So there are things that could affect what this win total could have potentially been if a guy like a Jabril Peppers or a guy like a Christian Gonzalez, more importantly, are missing from that football field, expected starters for this defense. There's a lot up in the air right now. I like the direction they're heading. I just genuinely have no real idea where this team's going to go, but I think it's going to at least be better than what it was last year, at a minimum. But those are my thoughts, my opinions on the New England Patriots for this upcoming 2025 season. Let me know in the comment section down below. Thoughts, opinions, and more. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.